8 years before September 11th, the towers were already attacked. The threat was documented. The suspects were known. But something didn't change. In this episode of the True Crime Report, When Justice Fails, we uncover the psychological undercurrents of radicalization and the systemic fractures that let a warning slip through the cracks. Imagine a network of men, bound not just by ideology, but by a shared sense of grievance that festered into something explosive. What if the very system designed to stop them had an insider's view, but chose to look away? This isn't just a story of destruction. It's a probe into the minds that plotted it and the institutional blind spots that failed to intervene. Let's start with the rupture. On a cold February day in 1993, a yellow Ryder van pulls into the underground garage of the World Trade Center in New York City. Inside, over 1,000 pounds of urea nitrate, a homemade explosive. At 12:18 p.m. it detonates. The blast carves a crater several stories deep, kills 6 people and injures more than 1,000. Smoke chokes the towers, trapping office workers in darkness for hours. But here's the unsettling part. This wasn't entirely unforeseen. Investigators later determined that members of the group had discussed bomb plots in recorded conversations months before the attack. However, it remains disputed whether those discussions clearly identified the World Trade Center itself. So why did it happen? Before we dive into the timeline, consider this contradiction. The FBI had an informant embedded in a radical circle recording conversations about bombs and targets. Yet just before the attack, that lifeline was severed. Was it a procedural misstep or something deeper? A failure to recognize the psychological escalation from talk to action? Now let's establish the normalcy that was shattered. New York in the early 1990s was a hub of diversity, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered in certain communities. At the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn, a blind Egyptian cleric named Omar Abdul Rahman, known as the Blind Sheikh, preached a fiery brand of Islam, condemning U.S. support for Israel and secular Arab regimes. His followers, many immigrants from the Middle East, included men like Ramzi Yousef, a Kuwaiti-born engineer with Pakistani roots, who arrived in the U.S. in 1992 on a fake Iraqi passport. Years later, investigators would identify Ramzi Yousef as the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who would become known as a key architect of the September 11th attacks. At the time of the 1993 bombing, however, those connections were not fully understood. But at the time, Yousef presented as unassuming, blending into the city's fabric. The rupture begins with the formation of this cell. Yousef connected with others. Emad Salem, a Palestinian Jordanian, Nidal Ayad, a chemical engineer, Mahmoud Abu Halima, a cab driver known as the Red for his hair, and Abdul Rahman Yassin, an Iraqi-American. They allegedly gathered in apartments and storage units, mixing chemicals under Yousef's direction. Behavioral analysis here reveals a pattern, a mix of ideological fervor and personal vendettas. Yousef's language in later interviews showed no remorse, framing the attack as retaliation for U.S. policies. But contradictions emerge. Why target civilians if the grievance was political? Psychologists might point to cognitive dissonance, where rage justifies escalation, masking deeper insecurities or a need for control. But this is where the investigation's own fractures start to show. Enter Emad Salem, a former Egyptian army officer turned FBI informant. Hired in 1991 after approaching the bureau about threats from Abdul Rahman's circle, Salem infiltrated the group. He recorded hours of conversations where members discussed building bombs and targeting Jewish locations. Investigators believe Salem even warned of a plot involving explosives. Yet, in a procedural breakdown, the FBI pulled him out in July 1992. By disputes over payment. Salem wanted $1.5 million for his risks, and his refusal to wear a wire during sensitive meetings. After the bombing, Salem publicly alleged that he had proposed substituting harmless powder in place of real explosives during earlier discussions. According to Salem, that proposal was rejected by his FBI handlers. Federal authorities have consistently denied having prior knowledge of a specific plan to bomb the World Trade Center, and recordings confirm bomb-related discussions but do not conclusively show that the Bureau knew the exact target or timeline. Either way, it raises serious questions. Did ego or bureaucracy override the need to pursue every lead? As the plot unfolded without interference, the group's behavior showed red flags. Salem rented the van under his own name, a rookie mistake suggesting overconfidence or inexperience. Yousef, the more calculated one, tested explosives in the Philippines earlier, indicating premeditation. But if investigators had connected these dots, visa irregularities, chemical purchases, might the rupture have been prevented? This highlights a systemic weakness: siloed intelligence. The FBI was tracking Islamic fundamentalists in New York, but coordination with immigration or international agencies was limited. The explosion hits and tension mounts in the aftermath. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, FBI, NYPD, and others, springs into action. A key breakthrough: a fragment of the van with a vehicle identification number leads back to the Jersey City rental agency. Salem, in a baffling move, returns days later to reclaim his $400 deposit, claiming the van was stolen. He's arrested on March 4, 1993. Searches of his apartment yield chemicals matching the bomb residue, leading to Emad Salem and others. A letter to the New York Times from the Liberation Army claims responsibility, citing U.S. aid to Israel. Yassin is questioned but released due to insufficient evidence at the time. He flees to Iraq and remains a fugitive. Yousef escapes to Pakistan. Here's another layer of psychological tension: the group's contradictions. They were amateurs in execution, leaving trails like rental records, yet driven by a sophisticated motive tied to global jihad. Abdul Rahman's influence looms large. His sermons allegedly inspired the cell, though he denied direct involvement. In interviews, followers showed signs of manipulation, blind loyalty masking fear of exclusion. Prosecutors later argued this was a radicalization network, but was it fully understood? Media coverage amplified the fear, potentially biasing perceptions, yet the justice system succeeded here. Swift arrests prevented further immediate harm. But the investigation unravels further revelations. In June 1993, the FBI raids a Queens warehouse, catching Abdul Rahman's followers mixing bombs for a day of terror plot targeting the UN tunnels and federal buildings. This follow-up scheme suggests the first bombing was no isolated act but part of an escalating pattern. Salem, rehired after the blast, provided crucial intel. Yet his earlier removal haunts the narrative. If retained, might both plots have been stopped? This points to prosecutorial and investigative blind spots, underestimating the network's persistence. Sentencing outcomes reflect mixed justice. In 1994, Salem, Emad Salem, and Emad Salem, who aided with bomb manuals, receive life sentences after a trial revealing Salem's tapes. Yousef, captured in 1995 via a tip in Pakistan and extradited, is convicted in 1997 alongside driver Ayad Ismail, also getting life. Abdul Rahman is sentenced to life in 1995 for the landmarks plot, not directly for the bombing. Successes: thorough evidence collection, international cooperation. Failures: Yassin's escape and broader intelligence gaps. Did bias play a role? Some argue early focus on Middle Eastern suspects was warranted by evidence, but it risked overlooking domestic threats, as seen in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing initially misattributed to Islamists. Now the climax, the strongest unresolved contradiction. Salem's allegations versus official denials. He claimed the FBI supervisor nixed the fake bomb plan, potentially allowing the real attack. Tapes show discussions of bombings, but not explicit WTC details. Investigators believe the Bureau knew a bombing was discussed, but procedural rules, needing court approval for certain surveillance, limited action. This fracture, a system prioritizing protocol over prevention, possibly fueled by overconfidence after prior successes. Psychologically, it echoes the perpetrator's own delusions, believing threats wouldn't materialize. If the warning was there, why the inaction? In the end, the 1993 bombing reshaped little immediately. Counter-terrorism funding increased modestly, but major reforms waited until after September 11th. Sentencings held perpetrators accountable, yet the radical network persisted. If the first attack was a warning, why wasn't it enough? What do you think? Did institutional fractures enable this, or was it inevitable? Comment below. And if this case left you questioning how systems break under pressure, explore our Historic Justice Failures playlist. where we examine the warning signs that were missed and the consequences that followed. Subscribe for more investigations where truth meets the fault lines of accountability.